Have you ever jacked in? Have you ever wired tripped?
You ready?
This is not like TV, only better. This is life. It's a piece of somebody's life. It's about the stuff that you can't have, right? The forbidden fruit, straight from the cerebral cortex. I mean, you're there, you're doing it, you're feeling it.
Are you beginning to see the possibilities here?
This episode, back with a vengeance, joining me once again, interviewer, critic, filmmaker, from the Hey You Made Your Movie show, Mr. Carl Diamond.
I'm glad to be back. It's good to be back here again, talking about another movie and not someone's entire career.
Yes, and once again, we are in the year of 1995. We are talking about Strange Days, directed by Catherine Bigelow, with a story by, co-written by, and produced by Mr. James Cameron, the one and only. Action! Strange Days to me is a movie that there are so many ideas and concepts that really stick with you when you watch this movie. Themes and just from the storytelling. But then visually, and in terms of a visceral watch, I find this is something that when you first see this movie, there are scenes that just stick with you. And you can never unsee those scenes, you know? They're just embedded into your mind, for better or for worse. Some of them really disturbing.
I watched this movie for the first time in college in a room full of women. And had I known, I would have picked a different one.
That's what I was going to ask, was when was the first time you watched this movie?
There was men too, but it was like a lot of people, and there are certain scenes in this movie where you're like, why did I have to be the guy to pick this movie? Why am I the guy showing everyone this movie?
I was much younger when I saw this movie. I saw this in early high school. I had a buddy who had an older brother, and his room, like, we'd go into his older brother's room and he just had all these VHSs lined up, and it was considered the adult dark collection.
Oh.
My buddy slept over at my house once and he brought Strange Days. He'd already seen it. I feel like he was just pushing it like Ralph Fiennes in the movie. He was just peddling the movie to all his friends.
Do you like VHS tapes?
How do you boil this movie down? It's such a hybrid of so many ideas and genres.
The way I boil it down is that Ray Fiennes, or Ralph Fiennes, is a drug dealer who sells memories on discs. And one day he receives a disc that's a brutal murder of a young woman. And he works in the industry of this kind of black market memories. He's both professionally and morally obligated to investigate it without going to the cops. And it brings him into a world of all sorts of characters.
And the way we see these memories translated on screen is basically these POV oneers. Or not oneers, there are hidden cuts.
They feel like oneers, but they're really impressive.
The opening scene is somebody experiencing a robbery of a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, it's a bunch of gang guys robbing a Chinese restaurant very quickly.
Nowadays, we've seen so much of that aesthetic where it's first-person POV. Movies like Hardcore Henry certainly takes that and runs with it. But when this movie did it, it felt really innovative. Even when I was watching it again the other night, there's still something that feels very much its own. It still feels a bit different than what we see today.
It's film.
Yeah.
This is 35mm film, so it's heavy, and you can't just shake it because it's a physical thing in there, and it will move around, and you'll fuck up your take. And I think the first time I watched it, I was also baffled by I don't know how they did it. These are some like incredibly fluid 35mm shots. I Googled it. How did they do POV shots in Strange Days? And I got a little blip from a cinematographer website. Said that they had built a custom camera. And to be able to have the budget and the know-how and the resources to have someone go, hey, this is the shot I want. Can you build a camera that allows me to do it? Oh, well, yeah, okay, we'll do that. It's fascinating. The stuff that we just take for granted now because we can shoot with our phones.
So we mentioned in the beginning that this is essentially a collaboration between James Cameron and his wife at the time, Catherine Bigelow.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can really see the stamp of Catherine Bigelow, but then you can also see the stamp of James Cameron. And there are almost like certain scenes that feel very James Cameron-y. but then there's an overall intensity that just feels like every Catherine Bigelow movie is very visceral. There's so much visual impact to her movies, but then there are other sequences that just feel straight out of Terminator 2. When the cops are chasing Iris, the prostitute, through the subway, and it just feels like a chase sequence. That's another scene in Terminator 2. I think the music even has some similar cues.
What parts in particular stand out to you as, oh yeah, this is Catherine Bigelow for sure?
When I think Catherine Bigelow, my mind first goes to Point Break. And then I think of the opening credits, just the surfing shots and how immersive those shots feel. And I find that same quality is there in Strange Days. Well, I guess part of the movie would benefit the movie that the viewer does feel like they're experiencing this movie, like they're kind of in it as opposed to just objectively sitting there and letting it all wash over them. So yeah, I guess it's just an overall visceralness.
You watch a camera movie like, oh, that's violence, and oh god, it's gory, but it's like, okay, yeah, I know I'm watching a movie. Whereas Bigelow's violence is more like, oh, that's something that could probably happen to a real person.
Yeah, Catherine Bigelow is more brutal than Cameron. The violence is kind of disturbing in this movie. There's a fun action element to it as far as action cinema goes, but the violence is pretty brutal. You know, when I think of scenes of this movie that still disturb me, the first scene up would be with Tom Sizemore, who plays Max, his friend. Ralph Fiennes is
His ex-cop buddy. I think they're both ex-cops. So Tom Sizemore, again, is the down-on-his-luck PI who is being hired by a music producer to become this assassin. But he's also really fucked up in the head. And the way he kills these women is so hard to watch on screen because what he does, and he's wearing the squid, so he's recording his experience killing these women, hunting and stalking this woman. And then when he handcuffs her to the, I think it was towel rack, he puts a recording unit on her and then streams his consciousness to her. So she's experiencing his feelings. And then he sexually assaults her and then kills her. And it's the most twisted thing I've seen in the genre.
This is one of those scenes that will stay with you. You can't unsee the sequence after you watch it.
When Ray Fiennes watches the tape or streams the tape, he's like in pain, and I think he vomits the first time he sees it. So you cut back and forth between the person reacting to it and then the footage. Yeah, I'm amazed it only got an R rating.
The other thing that really disturbs me in this movie is the idea, less graphic, but still, it's just the concept I find is horrific. It can just happen. Somebody can overdose. 2 characters in this movie have their brain fried while using the squid device. And you see their perspective, and it's just multicolored. They're alive, but they're in a coma of static in their mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're color correcting, if you kind of turn everything up and you break the footage.
From their perspective, you can hear somebody being like, hey, wake up, wake up. But it's all reverbed, just really at a distance.
It's horrible.
Tick! It's Lenny! Hey, Tick, come on! Come on!
When they find that character in the van.
Yeah, he's the illegal copier.
What do you do with the body after that? Right?
Yeah, so you can't call the cops because he's technically still alive, but you killed him.
Every actor in this movie, especially in the 90s, is a huge character actor. If you just go down the cast, like Ralph Fiennes, you can say is a leading A-list actor, but you could also kind of see him as a character actor. He does play a lot of side characters, but to go down the cast, Tom Sizemore, character actor, Michael Wincott, character actor, Juliette Lewis.
She always plays Juliette Lewis, but it's always... you have Vincent D'Onofrio. You have William is it Fichtner or Fichtner? He was in that, and then at the same time he was in Heat that same year. Angela Bassett, she is an amazing character actress. Angela Bassett's an amazing actress. Closest thing to a leading actor in this movie.
I mean, if you look at the relationship between Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett, pretty ahead of its time.
She's like a powerhouse character.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting dynamic because it's not like you have a strong man and weak woman. You have incredibly weak and vulnerable man being protected by this absolute weapon of a woman. Angela Bassett is ripped in this movie.
Her character's name is Mace. She's a chauffeur, limo driver, but also a bodyguard.
You get into this limo, we'll get you through LA, because LA is a war zone. It's like, almost like the war zone is mundane. Ray Fiennes is driving around. Next to him are people throwing Molotov cocktails at tanks.
Those mundane, scenic driving, the world is going to hell in a handbag type of shots remind me of the RoboCop movies. Whenever you see Detroit in the background of some scenes, people are getting robbed or mugged. It's just that level of degradation that's going on.
Yeah, every attack scene or every riot scene in RoboCop is constantly happening in the background in this movie.
So yeah, Angela Bassett, it's got to be her most badass role ever. Her relationship with Ralph Fiennes' character, it's kind of like they know they love each other, but it's just unspoken.
Their relationship is very unique because they met each other at a point where he was super strong and she was super weak. They're obviously in love with each other, but it's like he can't get over his ex-girlfriend and she can't bring the words. She can't say it. I think love for her is all physical. Not like physical like sex, but like what you do, how you support a person. Ray Fiennes' character is absolute train wreck. She is there to help him and support him, be a place for him to recover whenever he needs it.
Ralph Fiennes is talking to Angela Bassett, and he's talking about his constant attempts to save Juliette Lewis's character, Faith, from Philo, her new boyfriend, and she keeps pushing him away. And he's talking to Angela Bassett, and he's like, have you ever loved someone so much that no matter how many times they fuck you over, you keep going after them? She's staring at Ralph Fiennes, and she's like, you have no idea.
It's like, yes.
Look, this is your life. Right here, right now. It's real time. You hear me? Real time. Time to get real, not playback. You understand me? She doesn't love you anymore. Maybe she did once, I don't know, but she doesn't now. These are used emotions. It's time to trade them in. Memories were meant to fade, Lenny. They're designed that way for a reason.
I think there's a lot of violence against women in Strange Days. Constant violence against women in a movie that has to mean something. And the only two women who have made it where they will not be used are Angela Bassett's character and Juliette Lewis's character, whereas Angela Bassett fights hard and changes herself and she kicks ass. Juliette Lewis has fully embraced the men taking advantage of women and violence against women thing, but for her benefit. I just found that interesting.
I think the whole, like we were talking about, he runs to her at the end and then they kiss and the confetti drops and it turns to the year 2000. To me, that last 15 minutes is just masterful. Like the music, the lighting, the visual of the confetti falling. I just find it such a powerful scene.
I'm so glad it lands for you.
Because it doesn't for you.
It's a little overdone.
It's very romantic.
It just feels a little awkward to me, but I'm so glad it lands for you because I want this movie to land with people. Like, this movie has so much to pull you in and it has so much to push you away.
As we've tried to break down here, you've got a serial killer movie, kind of a slasher movie. You've got a sci-fi movie. You have a movie that's dealing with police brutality and racism. You have a cyberpunk movie.
It definitely feels like James Cameron trying to write a William Gibson story.
There is something very weird and off-putting about this entire movie.
Yeah.
Part of that I do think is because it's blending so many different tropes from different genres. It becomes kind of a hard recommendation. I would tell anybody to watch this movie, but I don't know how many people who watch this movie for the first time really vibe with it. I think it's an acquired taste.
It was very apparent to me when I was watching it this time that this movie kind of starts a little, but then changes its gears and starts another movie. It's like a bunch of different movies all got crammed into one. Because you do have that bit with the killer, and then you have the tape of the police shooting, and they're not really related, but somehow they are. I can see how some people would turn it off at a certain point.
This one scene that really hit me this most recent time I watched it, because it shows you the positives of wire tripping. Ralph Fiennes goes to the club that he frequents. He's buddy-buddy with the sound engineer guy.
Mm-hmm.
And this dude's in a wheelchair. And Ralph Fiennes is like, oh, I got a special gift for you. And he gives him a specific disc. The guy puts it on. It's just him living out the memory of somebody running on this nice sunny beach, runs by a beautiful woman, they make eye contact. Then you see the guy so happy and crying because he's feeling what it feels like to have legs again. It makes you understand, oh, there's a positive side to this drug.
This movie does make the point of showing you all this terrible stuff that this drug does. But then you also have the positive, which is this beautiful clip for this crippled guy who's never going to be able to run. Yeah, you have people who are doing all this crazy shit when they get drunk or when they get high. But at the same time, some people need that to just be.
At the end of that scene, when he opens his eyes and he's back in reality and he's got this expression on his face that is so like, oh, fuck. It just wasn't real. This is real. And it sucks.
The first time he explains wire tripping to this lawyer, it's his whole spiel that he does. I'm the magic man. I'm your digital priest. It's just so fun. Like, he's puffing himself up. I just love the way the technology is explained.
I mean, we know Ralph Fiennes is an excellent actor, so you give him that monologue, that dialogue, he just runs with it. The teaser trailer for this movie is Ralph Fiennes doing that monologue, talking to the camera. And I saw that trailer in theaters as a kid. I was like, what the fuck is this movie? Who is this guy talking to us, the audience?
I remember as an adult going to a movie theater that showed old movies, and they would cut old trailers into, like, before the movie to get you into the vibe. And then they showed that trailer for Strange Days. And it's this big face in front of you, and it's just doing that whole spiel. And it's so powerful in a theater.
Have you ever jacked in? Have you ever wire tripped? No? A virgin brain. Well, we're gonna start you off right.
This isn't like TV, only better. This is life. Yeah, it's a piece of somebody's life. Pure and uncut. Straight from the cerebral cortex. You're there. You're doing it, seeing it, hearing it. You're feeling it.
This movie is a mood piece to me. It's similar to Blade Runner, where I can turn this movie on at any point and just get sucked into its aura. This movie really uses the cinematic language to its fullest extent. All the elements coming together, like music, sound design, lighting, all these things work to, I think, engage and immerse the viewer in a sensory experience. It transcends the narrative of the movie to where you're invested in the atmosphere, the vibes, the tone that emotes from all these elements working together.
It is a weird soup of a movie. Beautifully shot, directed by a great director, written by a fantastic storyteller. The questions about the future it asks are very relevant to today. There's nothing else like it, I don't think. So I recommend grabbing a bag of chips, grabbing a beer if you're of age, or something smokable. Sit down with some friends and analyze this movie.
And that is Strange Days.
It's a very atmospheric song. It's not like, ooh, strange days, looking around, world's weird.
Side note, you should check out our Johnny Mnemonic episode.
Oh, yeah.
Where Carl breaks down everything you'd need to know about what goes into a cyberpunk movie.
Believe it or not, I'm gonna wire trip. I never thought I could live in the past. Flying away on the memories of my ex. Who can it be?